Was Mansa Musa truly the richest human being who ever lived, or are we repeating a medieval exaggeration without questioning it? Today's problem is simple but dangerous. We keep quoting a number that may never have existed. In this video, we're going to separate measurable wealth from myth and uncover what Mansa Musa was really rich in gold, power, or something far more valuable. In every list of the world's richest people in history, one name towers above all others. Not Rockefeller, not Augustus Caesar, not even modern billionaires. It is Mansa Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire, a man often described as so rich that his wealth cannot be calculated. But here's the uncomfortable question historians rarely ask. If his wealth was truly infinite, why can't we measure it? When people hear the name Mansa Musa, one phrase almost always follows it: the richest man in history. It's repeated in documentaries, viral videos, school lessons, and internet rankings as if it were a proven mathematical fact. But here's the uncomfortable reality: no one alive today, and no one in the 14th century ever calculated Mansa Musa's wealth. This is where the problem of exaggeration begins. The story of Mansa Musa's riches did not spread through balance sheets or royal ledgers. It spread through stories. Merchants told other merchants. Travelers repeated what they heard in markets. Chroniclers wrote what amazed them, not what they could verify. Over time, wonder turned into certainty, and certainty turned into legend. Most of what we know about Mansa Musa comes from Arab historians such as Al-Umari, who never met him personally. Their accounts were based on interviews, rumors, and secondhand testimonies collected years after Musa's famous pilgrimage to Mecca. These writers were not economists. They were observers living in a world where numbers were often symbolic rather than precise. When they described Musa as unimaginably wealthy, they were expressing awe, not issuing a financial report. And yet, centuries later, modern audiences treat those words as literal data. One of the most repeated claims is that Mansa Musa gave away so much gold during his journey that he single-handedly destroyed the economy of Egypt for more than a decade. It's a powerful image of a king so rich that generosity itself becomes destructive. But when historians look for contemporary Egyptian records confirming this long-term economic collapse, they find something very different. Gold prices fluctuated, yes, but markets recovered as they always did. The idea of a decade-long crisis appears much later, growing larger with each retelling. This is how exaggeration evolves. A short-term economic disturbance becomes a generational catastrophe. Generosity becomes recklessness, wealth becomes infinite. Another layer of exaggeration comes from modern comparisons. People often try to convert Mansa Musa's gold into today's US dollars, producing numbers so large they seem almost comedic. Trillions, hundreds of billions. But these conversions ignore a critical truth. Medieval economies did not function like modern ones. Wealth was not liquid, global, or standardized. Gold sitting in the ground or moving through trade routes does not equal personal net worth in a modern sense. By forcing modern financial logic onto a medieval empire, we create numbers that feel impressive but explain nothing. The exaggeration also survives because it's convenient. The idea of the richest man ever is catchy, it's clickable, it's easy to remember. Complexity doesn't go viral, superlatives do. Saying Mansa Musa was extremely wealthy within a powerful trade empire doesn't spread nearly as fast as saying he was richer than everyone who ever lived. But history suffers when we stop questioning these claims. If Mansa Musa's wealth truly had no limits, then why did the Mali Empire eventually weaken? Why didn't infinite gold translate into permanent dominance? Why do surviving records focus more on trade, administration, and religion than on endless treasure rooms? The problem of exaggeration isn't that Mansa Musa wasn't wealthy. He absolutely was. The problem is that over time, admiration replaced accuracy and repetition replaced evidence. What began as astonishment in medieval marketplaces slowly transformed into an unquestioned modern myth. When we talk about wealth, our minds immediately jump to gold, heavy, shining, tangible. It feels permanent, unquestionable, and easy to understand. That's why Mansa Musa's story is almost always framed around gold: how much he owned, how much he gave away, how much he carried across the desert. But this obsession with gold hides a deeper truth. Gold alone has never been the most powerful form of wealth. In the medieval world, especially in West Africa, gold was valuable only when it could move. Gold buried in the earth meant nothing until it passed through hands, caravans, markets, and ports. What truly created wealth was control over trade routes, taxation, security, and trust. Mansa Musa did not rule because he had gold. He had gold because he ruled. The Mali Empire sat at the heart of the trans-Saharan trade network. Every caravan crossing the desert depended on safe passage, predictable rules, and stable leadership. Merchants were willing to pay taxes not because they were forced, but because the empire guaranteed protection. This system transformed raw resources into sustained prosperity. That is economic power, and it lasts far longer than a pile of gold. This is why comparing Mansa Musa's wealth to modern billionaires completely misses the point. A modern billionaire's power lies in assets, investments, and global influence that function across borders. Mansa Musa's power worked differently. His wealth was not locked in vaults. It flowed through the empire like blood through a body. Gold entered Mali, was taxed, redistributed, and reinvested into infrastructure, armies, and religious institutions. What mattered was not how much gold existed, but who decided where it went. During his pilgrimage, Musa's gold drew attention, but it was his authority that impressed rulers. He did not arrive as a wandering rich man, he arrived as a sovereign. Cities treated him as a political force, not a curiosity. The gold he distributed acted as a symbol of legitimacy, announcing Mali's presence on the world stage. Without political power, that gold would have been meaningless spectacle. There is another misconception hiding inside the gold narrative. The assumption is that giving away gold weakens a ruler. In reality, Musa's generosity functioned as strategy. By spreading wealth, he expanded influence. By funding mosques and scholars, he embedded Mali into the intellectual and religious networks of the Islamic world. These investments returned power in forms far more durable than metal. Gold also fluctuates in value, especially in pre-modern economies. Flood a market with it, and prices shift. Remove it, and scarcity returns. Economic power, however, lies in the ability to manage those fluctuations. Mansa Musa's empire survived not because it had endless gold, but because it maintained systems that absorbed shocks. Trade continued. Taxes continued. Authority remained intact. If Mansa Musa had simply been the richest individual carrying unimaginable treasure, his story would have ended when the gold ran out. Instead, his influence reshaped cities like Timbuktu, strengthened Mali's global connections, and elevated West Africa's role in world history. That kind of impact doesn't come from gold alone. It comes from administration, diplomacy, and control over economic flow. When we reduce Mansa Musa's legacy to a single resource, we strip away the intelligence behind his rule. Gold was visible, dramatic, and easy to remember. Economic power was quieter, more complex, and far more important. The tragedy of the myth is that it convinces us that wealth is something you own, when in reality, it is something you manage. The story always reaches its dramatic peak here. Mansa Musa enters Cairo, gold pours into the streets, and an entire economy collapses under the weight of his generosity. It's one of the most repeated moments in medieval history, often described as the single greatest act of economic disruption caused by one individual. But when we slow the story down and examine what actually happened during Mansa Musa's Hajj, the so-called crisis begins to look very different. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 was extraordinary, but not because it defied economic logic. It was extraordinary because it was political theater on a global scale. Pilgrimages were not just religious acts for powerful rulers. They were diplomatic statements. Musa was announcing Mali's arrival to the Islamic world, and Cairo was the perfect stage. According to contemporary chroniclers, Musa distributed gold to the poor, to scholars, to officials, and to merchants. Prices did rise temporarily, particularly for goods purchased by pilgrims and travelers. This kind of inflation was common whenever large groups passed through major cities. Cairo had seen similar price fluctuations during other pilgrimage seasons, military movements, and trade booms long before Musa arrived. The claim that Musa caused a decade-long economic depression comes from later interpretations, not from direct evidence. Egyptian records do not show long-term collapse. Trade did not stop, tax systems did not fail. Markets adjusted, as they always had. Gold entered circulation, prices responded, and over time, balance returned. What often gets ignored is that Musa did not only give gold away, he also borrowed gold on his return journey. This detail completely changes the narrative. If he truly possessed unlimited wealth, borrowing would have been unnecessary. Instead, Musa recognized the consequences of excessive generosity and adapted. He took loans at high interest rates to pull gold back out of circulation, stabilizing the economy he had disrupted. This was not the action of a reckless spender, but of a ruler who understood economic pressure. The idea of a catastrophic collapse survives because it fits a powerful myth. A king so rich that his kindness becomes destructive is more compelling than a ruler navigating complex economic realities. But history rarely operates at extremes. It lives in adjustments, negotiations, and corrections. Cairo's merchants did not curse Musa for ruining their lives. Many benefited from the sudden influx of gold. Scholars received funding. Builders received commissions. Trade connections between Mali and the Middle East strengthened. The pilgrimage opened diplomatic and commercial doors that remained open long after Musa returned home. The Hajj also exposed a deeper misunderstanding about medieval economies. They were not fragile glass structures that shattered under pressure. They were flexible systems built to absorb shocks. Inflation, scarcity, abundance, these were normal conditions, not disasters. Musa's presence intensified these cycles but did not destroy them. By framing the Hajj as an economic disaster, modern storytelling removes Musa's agency and intelligence. It turns him into a walking pile of gold rather than a strategic ruler. In reality, the pilgrimage was carefully planned, even if its consequences were larger than expected. Musa learned from them, adjusted his behavior, and continued to rule effectively afterward. The real impact of the Hajj was not economic damage, but global visibility. Mali went from being a distant name to a recognized power in Islamic and Mediterranean worlds. Maps began to include West Africa with greater detail. Scholars and architects followed Musa back to Mali, transforming cities like Timbuktu into centers of learning. The so-called crisis was not a collapse, but a collision between legend and reality, between spectacle and system, between how wealth looks and how it actually functions. When people imagine the wealth of the Mali Empire, they picture mountains of gold, endless caravans, and a ruler sitting atop unimaginable treasure. But this image is incomplete and in many ways misleading. Mali's true wealth did not sit quietly in vaults or travel only in the form of gold dust. It existed in systems, resources, and networks that were far more valuable than any single metal. Gold was only one part of Mali's economic engine. Salt, often overlooked in modern retellings, was just as essential. In the medieval world, salt was life itself. It preserved food, maintained health, and fueled trade across entire regions. Mali controlled major salt mines in places like Tagaza, and whoever controlled salt controlled survival. Caravans did not cross the Sahara just for gold. They crossed because Mali sat between what people needed and where it came from. Geography was Mali's silent advantage. The empire occupied a strategic position linking sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa and the Mediterranean world. Every major trade route passed through its territory or depended on its cooperation. This meant taxes, tariffs, and tribute flowed constantly into the state. Wealth was not a one-time event. It was a continuous process, renewing itself with every caravan that crossed the desert. But trade alone does not explain Mali's power. Knowledge was another asset, one rarely counted in popular rankings of wealth. Under Mansa Musa, cities like Timbuktu, Gao, and Jen became intellectual centers. Scholars arrived from across the Islamic world. Manuscripts were copied, studied, and preserved. Libraries expanded, and education became a pillar of the empire's identity. This intellectual capital strengthened Mali's reputation and influence in ways gold never could. Religion also played a role. By aligning Mali with the wider Islamic world, Mansa Musa embedded his empire into a shared cultural and legal system. This made trade easier, diplomacy smoother, and alliances more stable. Shared belief created trust, and trust reduced risk. In a world without global banks or insurance, trust was an economic resource of immense value. Infrastructure turned resources into power. Roads, caravanserais, administrative centers, and mosques were not just symbols of piety or prestige, they were investments. They made trade safer, governance more efficient, and loyalty easier to maintain. A merchant who felt protected by the state was more likely to return. A city with scholars and judges was more likely to remain stable. Labor was another hidden asset. Mali's population included farmers, miners, artisans, traders, and administrators. Their productivity sustained the empire. Gold did not mine itself. Salt did not transport itself. Wealth required organization, and Mali possessed it. Mansa Musa inherited these systems and expanded them, reinforcing structures that had existed long before his reign. When we focus only on gold, we miss how resilient Mali actually was. Empires built solely on extraction collapsed quickly. Mali endured because it diversified its sources of wealth. When gold production fluctuated, trade continued. When markets shifted, agriculture and taxation provided stability. This balance is what allowed the empire to project power far beyond its borders. The obsession with gold reduces Mali to a spectacle, but its real strength lay in how resources interacted. Trade supported learning, learning supported governance. Governance supported trade. Each element reinforced the other, creating a self-sustaining system of wealth that did not depend on any single resource. Mansa Musa's greatness was not that he ruled over endless gold, but that he understood the value of assets people could not easily measure. Salt, knowledge, trust, labor, geography, these were the foundations of Mali's prosperity, quietly generating power while history focused on the shine of metal. Long after Mansa Musa returned from his pilgrimage, long after the gold caravans faded into memory, his image took on a new life far from Mali inside the imagination of Europe. This is where history begins to blur into myth and where exaggeration becomes permanent. Medieval Europe knew very little about West Africa. What it did know came through fragments, traders' talis, Islamic texts, and rumors carried across deserts and seas. Into this vacuum of knowledge stepped Mansa Musa, transformed from a powerful African ruler into a symbol of impossible wealth. When facts are scarce, imagination fills the gaps, and Europe's imagination was hungry. One of the most influential examples of this myth-making is the Catalan Atlas of 1375. On this famous map, Mansa Musa is depicted seated on a throne, crowned, holding a massive gold nugget. This single image did more to define his legacy than any written account. It was not meant to be accurate. It was meant to communicate an idea. Africa is rich beyond measure. Musa became the visual shorthand for that belief. Maps in the medieval world were not neutral documents. They were political and economic tools. They reflected what people wanted to believe about the world, not just what they knew. By placing Mansa Musa at the center of West Africa with gold in his hand, European mapmakers were signaling opportunity. Wealth lay to the south. Trade routes mattered. Exploration promised reward. As this image spread, it hardened into certainty. Later European writers repeated earlier accounts without questioning them. Each retelling added another layer of awe. Musa's gold became more abundant, his generosity more extreme, his power more absolute. The absence of detailed African records made it easy to exaggerate without contradiction. This process also stripped Mansa Musa of complexity. He stopped being a ruler with policies, challenges, and limitations. He became a character in a story, a king defined by wealth alone. His empire was reduced to a treasure chest waiting to be opened. This framing would later justify European curiosity, ambition, and eventually exploitation. The myth was convenient. It allowed Europe to imagine Africa as a land of resources rather than civilizations. By focusing on gold, European narratives ignored Mali's scholars, administrators, and urban centers. Wealth without intellect feels easy to take. Wealth with structure and knowledge demands respect. Even centuries later, this myth continues to shape modern storytelling. When documentaries and articles repeat European descriptions without context, they unknowingly extend a medieval fantasy. Mansa Musa is presented as an anomaly rather than the product of a sophisticated system. His wealth is treated as magical rather than managed. What's often overlooked is that European writers never saw Mali at its height. They relied on second-hand accounts filtered through cultural bias. To them, a black African ruler commanding vast wealth disrupted their worldview. Exaggeration became a way to process that disruption. If Musa was unbelievably rich, then he could remain safely unreal. European myth-making did not create Mansa Musa's wealth, but it defined how the world remembers it. The legend grew not in Timbuktu, but in European libraries and map rooms. Over time, the image of a golden king replaced the reality of an intelligent ruler navigating trade, religion, and power. When we repeat the myth without questioning its origin, we inherit the assumptions of those who created it. The challenge is not to deny Mansa Musa's greatness, but to see beyond the lens that turned him into a symbol instead of a human being shaped by history, politics and strategy after the gold, the legends, the exaggerated numbers, and the centuries of retelling. We are left with a single question that matters more than all the rest. What was Mansa Musa actually wealthy in? Not what internet rankings claim, not what medieval maps suggest, but what can be reasonably understood when myth is stripped away from history. The hidden truth is that Mansa Musa's wealth cannot be reduced to a number because it never existed as a number in the first place. His power was not stored in vaults or measured in personal possessions. It was embedded in the structure of the Mali Empire itself. Musa did not own Mali the way a modern billionaire owns assets. He ruled it, and through that rule, he controlled flows of resources that moved constantly across his domain. Gold mattered, but not as an end. It functioned as a tool. It attracted attention, funded projects, and symbolized authority. But the real wealth was Musa's ability to mobilize resources when and where he wanted. That ability came from governance. Taxes collected from trade, agricultural output from fertile lands along the Niger River, tribute from vassal states, and loyalty from elites all combined into a system that produced sustained power. What makes this truth difficult to accept is that it resists spectacle. Infinite gold is easy to imagine, administrative competence is not. But history rewards systems, not stunts. Mansa Musa inherited a functioning empire and strengthened it through policy, religion, and diplomacy. His famous pilgrimage did not weaken Mali. It integrated it into a broader world, expanding networks that would continue to benefit the empire long after his return. Another hidden truth lies in how Musa used wealth culturally. He invested heavily in education, architecture, and religion, not because he was showing off, but because these investments created legitimacy. Scholars trained judges. Judges enforced law, law stabilized society, stability encouraged trade, trade generated wealth. This cycle mattered far more than the raw quantity of gold passing through Mali. The obsession with labeling Musa as the richest man in history actually diminishes his achievement. It frames him as a passive beneficiary of resources rather than an active shaper of history. Musa's significance lies in his choices. He chose to build institutions. He chose to connect Mali to global networks. He chose to turn temporary abundance into long-term influence. It is also important to confront what we cannot know. There are no surviving financial records detailing Musa's personal holdings. There are no inventories of royal treasuries. Any modern attempt to calculate his net worth is speculation dressed up as certainty. The hidden truth is humility. History sometimes refuses to give us clean answers, and forcing one creates distortion. Mansa Musa's legacy should not be measured by how much gold he had, but by what endured after him. Cities flourished, knowledge spread. Mali became a reference point in global geography and scholarship. These outcomes did not require infinite wealth. They required leadership, vision, and the ability to convert resources into lasting structures. When the noise fades and the myths fall away, Mansa Musa remains extraordinary. Not because he breaks our calculators, but because he challenges our definition of wealth itself. His story invites us to rethink what it means to be rich, and whether the most valuable forms of power are ever meant to be counted. As we step back from the gold caravans, the dramatic pilgrimages, and the centuries of storytelling, one thing becomes clear. The story of Mansa Musa is not a simple tale of unimaginable riches. It is a lesson in how history transforms power into myth and myth into unquestioned truth. Mansa Musa was not powerful because he possessed endless gold. He was powerful because he ruled a system that knew how to generate, control, and sustain wealth. His empire thrived on trade routes, knowledge, faith, administration, and trust elements far more difficult to measure than metal. Gold made him visible, but structure made him lasting. The exaggerations surrounding his wealth tell us as much about us as they do about him. We are drawn to superlatives, to extremes, to numbers so large they feel unreal. But when we chase those numbers, we miss the intelligence behind the rule, the discipline behind the generosity, and the strategy behind the spectacle. By looking beyond the legend, we don't diminish Mansa Musa's greatness, we restore it. He was not a fantasy king created by maps and myths. He was a real ruler navigating a complex world, making deliberate choices that reshaped West Africa's place in global history. So the next time you hear that Mansa Musa was the richest man who ever lived, remember that the true mystery is not how much gold he had, but how effectively he turned wealth into influence, influence into stability, and stability into a legacy that still forces us to question what wealth truly means.